Hi, everybody. I'm next weather chief meteorologist and hurricane specialist Ivan Cabrera. I'm here with Dave Bourne and Cindy Presser for our weekly talk on all things weather and what's been happening across not just South Florida, but across the tropics. Obviously, we're going to start with that. Lee, we were talking about how long we've been tracking Lee, this hurricane that's just been slumbering out there for
10 days.
Is it now? 10 days.
10 days, yeah.
So, we started back at, what was it, Labor Day?
Yeah, the 5th.
The 5th? My goodness. And so this is one of those storms that just lasts this long for a couple of reasons. It's one of those long tracks that goes through the Atlantic from the Cabo Verde Islands, but also it just slowed down over the last few days. We've been watching it just crawling, just making very little movement. But now it's starting to get picked up by the trough that we've been advertising since we were last here. Right. Last time we talked about that, we were feeling pretty good about the model consensus, which we don't have to show you at this point now. I mean, the thing is going to head up to the north, and we'll be covering that. As far as the impacts for New England, still expecting some good rain.
Surge, the rain, the wind, it's all Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, this busy weekend up
right,
there in Eastern
and they've been hit with torrential rain there just from a couple of fronts that have already come through part of the same system, and so they've picked up 6 to 12 inches of rainfall, which for Massachusetts, it's incredible. Although from what it looks like right now, the heaviest rain going to stay a little
just
offshore as things have shifted there, so that's going to be good for them. Oh, what else is next? So we have our we're just going through the alphabet here. We're almost we've ticked off 13 storms, I think, Cindy, and 5 hurricanes, 3 of which were major. So we're getting going here.
We're right in there in the for an above average season.
Yeah, and especially because we just peaked on the 10th. So it's gonna the activity just continues really into September, October. As we well know, some of the strongest hurricanes have hit in October. So there it is. That's the next tropical wave that will likely now be a depression. Feeling pretty good. It's actually looking better organized today. Cluster of thunderstorms. I mean, it's nothing closed yet, so we don't have a depression, but we likely will by the time we get into the weekend. The next name is Nigel.
Nigel, it's going right through that area. They've been saying a high development potential here over the next few days, and likely will continue to.
Yeah, so you'll be probably by the weekend tracking Nigel.
This year, we're watching Lee and Nigel and Margot is up in the North Atlantic.
But and then Margot we haven't talked about much because it's a storm system that really isn't going to be impacting land. But it's interesting for next week, despite all the activity here, because Nigel looks right now like it's going to be turning more to the north, even earlier than Lee did. We may be, just relaxing here next week and having a quiet week and not worrying about, any landmass threat. Of course, Bermuda's always in the way there, unfortunately, with these storms. But look at that climb there in latitude to the point where, Lee was down closer to the northern Leeward Islands. We were concerned about impacts with Puerto Rico, and that didn't materialize as it stayed safely away. But that is looking pretty good right now. Could that change? Yes, but we're getting, model run after model run now. It's been pretty consistent that we're looking for a northward turn there.
The trend with these turning and going out, staying out to sea, being fish storms, is an interesting trend, isn't it?
Absolutely. We like that. The ridge has kind of been, broken down a little bit. The trough is in the eastern U.S., and so these storms don't steer themselves. They go around that big Bermuda high that we talk about, and on the southern flank of it, the winds are pushing it towards the west. If it, what we call, amplifies or becomes stronger and then shifts further west, that's when we start, looking at anything coming off of Africa with a lot more interest. So long as there is, the curving going on because of the features in the eastern U.S., we're feeling pretty good. But that would be Nigel. So let's talk about Gerda. We're going to take you back to 1969 because yesterday I don't remember the last time I talked about a hurricane watch for Maine.
For Maine and not
for places across the southeast, including Florida, right? I mean, that is something. And, Dahlia obviously was a feature there, and, we fared excellent here across South Florida anyway. But Hurricane Gerda was in 69, and speaking of Miami, this is a tropical depression that hit Miami back into 69, and then the system just rolled up the eastern seaboard and got relatively close to it. But of course, Maine jets out. It got in the way of what was, of course, Gerda in 69, and Eastport, Maine. That's about as east as you get before you get into our good friends in Canada there. But that was an actual hurricane landfall. Lee's not going to be a hurricane landfall. It's going to be what we call, Dave, talk about post-tropical, extratropical, because that comes out and it's just,
Well, what is the difference? Right. What is it?
The hurricanes, it's the warm water, getting the energy from the warm water, but as Lee moves north, you get the cooler air coming in. So the storm loses its tropical characteristics. You start to see fronts forming, warm fronts, cold fronts, and it's actually getting energy from the cooler air and the warmer air, that difference in temperature, as opposed to just the heat content there. It's just in the ocean.
Right, which is why we don't stop tracking it, when they go north like that, even though we know it's going into water temperatures that are, well below 80 degrees, 60s, 70s, but they turn into these hybrids, and they could, they sometimes can do significant damage. It's a big coastal nor'easter there across New England. But yes, we've been talking about the curve to the north, and we talked about that with you last week with Hurricane Lee. Thankfully, that was, just in the cards for us as that trough moved in. That's the upper level winds and the jet stream. When they dip down at the surface, we have a cold front that materializes as a result. And so we've got, like Dave said, all these, different densities and air masses, and that's where Lee is eventually going to pull its strength from, not from the ocean temperatures. But look what happens here. That same front, if you follow it, comes all the way down to central Florida, and then it stalls, of course.
Yeah, the high is, you like to see a high pressure coming in over Texas, and that could push the front down through South Florida, sliding over the Carolinas. So the front moves off the coast, but just stalls here over South Florida.
And if you think of it, it's just kind of like a rope here. Just it's got a lot of slack because the low is up to the north. If the low was further south, it would drag the front through, and then all of a sudden we get into the air that is behind it, which places like the Midwest. Are you going to? Somebody's going to the Midwest. Did you talk about
next
that?
Week?
Next week.
Ah.
So you'll be in a fall air mass, and you're going to pack your
do I have fall clothes?
Huge sweaters for Cindy. She hates the cold, but I would find it quite refreshing. I'm always hot. Yeah. All right, so it's going to stall here, and that's important for us because we're going to stay on the southern side of it, and that is going to mean a whole lot of rain, I think, coming up for the next few days.
Oftentimes south of these fronts, you get the moisture just piling up, and a lot of high moisture, and that's what we're dealing with this weekend.
Right, and the models have been locking in on that, and so it stays there, and it's not going to be as far south where I don't think we'll get that lift that places like Lake Okeechobee. And I talk about that because when you get that, then you start getting into the potential for some stronger storms that tilt, severe storms. But I think we'll be far enough south from the front for that. But can't rule out a few stronger gusts, and certainly the rainfall. It is going to be juicy. We just looked at the weather balloons they send out every morning, and the atmosphere is ready to go. So once the storms get going, they're going to put down a lot of rain. In fact, some of our models here picking up. In fact, this is from the Weather Prediction Center through this weekend, which it's just a general overview of what the rain's going to be like. But I haven't seen colors like that in a while.
But not a washout for the weekend. We don't want you to think that, oh my goodness, we're not going to be able to do anything. No.
Right. You're going to have plenty of time. And in fact, if it was a washout, we wouldn't get as much rain because it wouldn't be thunderstorms. It would just be like this flat, light rain, which sometimes for the weekend not a bad thing. But we're still liking the summer hanging on here. So we need the heat, we need the sun, we need the temperatures in the 90s to get everything cooking, but the storms will have developed in an environment that will be just capable of producing some locally heavy rain. So we'll watch for that. But as Cindy mentioned, this is not all going to happen, in one afternoon. Right. This is through the next few days, and some of the storms will, in some cases, drop enough rainfall we could get some local flood advisories.
They will be trying to move to the interior here with that sea breeze. That's why it's higher rain chances over the interior, but still along the coast, we'll get a few.
And really, we're just getting back to a more typical pattern. I mean, a little above average, but what happened last week, we were behind that front that really just, the dew points, the humidity just dropped where, I couldn't even feel the humidity coming outside. And so that was nice. A little taste of our dry season, which doesn't begin till mid-October. So we have a ways to go. But the good news is, Lee looks better for New England in that it's not going to land as a hurricane. It's going to be a coastal low. They are going to have some impacts there. I don't think the game, by the way, if you're wondering, with the Patriots at Gillette Stadium up there in Foxborough, that's not going to be an issue. They've played in a lot worse things, and I've been in there when they have. And so that is the case here, that we're not going to worry about anything get tropical over the next few days. We'll keep you posted if that changes, but it's just umbrella time here across South Florida beginning tomorrow and through the weekend. And by the way, if you ever have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. You just go to our social media profiles, and we'll be happy to do that next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.